Welcome to the Kentucky History Channel, where we strive to bring you all the Kentucky history content you want and you deserve. Kentucky is a part of all of us, and we plan on covering all the history we can, from Pike County to Fulton County, from Louisville to Harlan. Here on our YouTube channel, you can find many videos dedicated to different events, people, governors, and places in Kentucky. There's something for everybody. While you're here, if you like the channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification button so you get notified anytime new Kentucky history is available. And if you want to support the channel, we have a Patreon page as well, or patreon.com/KYHistoryPod. Welcome back to the Kentucky History Podcast. I'm your host, Jameson Cable, and I'm joined again with David Kirkpatrick. How you doing?
I'm doing awesome. You?
I'm doing good. We're busting out some Kentucky history here, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Kentucky Constitution. Oh, well, the first Kentucky Constitution, because there's been four?
There's four. Yep.
Four. Jeez.
We're on our fourth one.
Sure, got it wrong. Got it wrong 3 times. Maybe this.
That's right.
Maybe this one's the right way. Oh, but anyway, this would be, if you've been following along. So we started about with the new republic here, talking about Kentucky becoming a state, and we're going to kind of cover this, 1792 to 1812-ish time period and beyond. Kentucky's getting its feet wet, starting to walk. Ironing things out, and in the last episode we kind of talked about that becoming statehood, a little bit of a review episode, but now we're going to get into the Kentucky Constitution, which is big and long.
Really?
And we're just going to kind of go through it, talk about some things, and just kind of dive into what they were thinking in 1792 about some of these rules and so forth, and probably talk a little bit how some of them changed 10 years later.
That's right.
Was it 1800? 1799 when they wrote the second one. Yeah. Wow. We all make mistakes. Sometimes it takes us 9 years to realize them. Sometimes it hits us right in the face.
Well, the hard part is, though, it took 6 years to get the first one done, and then we only kept it for 9. So, but
That's true. Oh, man. So, the Kentucky Constitution and I assume most I don't know. I'm not a Constitution scholar, but I assume most constitutions probably have articles, sections, and so forth, right?
Right.
A lot of lawyer stuff, I guess, or lawmaker stuff that, anyway. But the first article of the document actually outlines the fundamental principles of the separation of power in the Kentucky government. Very similar to the United States and so forth. But that's pretty much the first, the main part of Article 1. The first 5 sections of the first article pretty much emphasizes the fundamental principles of government, divisions, and the establishment of the Kentucky legislative body. So, getting into that, and this is civics, man. This is straight up civics.
That's right.
And so forth. It divides the powers of government into 3 distinct branches. Guess what they are?
My son actually did this past week in school, so even if I didn't know it before, and every American should, he's learned it now. So,
yeah. So we got legislative, executive, and judicial. Each branch is entrusted kind of with its separate group of officials and so forth. It prohibits individuals or groups within one branch from exercising powers reserved for the other branch, except in cases specifically allowed elsewhere in the Constitution. So, you can be in the executive branch, but you cannot cross over into the judicial or the legislative branch. You have to stay in your lane. It establishes that the legislative power of Kentucky resides in the General Assembly, which consists of a Senate and House of Representatives. It specifies that representatives are to be elected annually by qualified voters in each county on the first Tuesday in May, with the option to extend the election period for 3 days if necessary. There you go.
Pretty straightforward. Yeah.
Pretty straightforward. Um, I find it interesting that it's qualified voters in each or representatives from each county, as opposed to we've not got to this point of where one representative represents more than multiple counties.
Right.
Which at this point there's only like there's 9 counties, and then when Kentucky becomes a state, it jumps up to like maybe 15 or something. So there's not a lot of
Yeah.
counties, not a
There's
lot
a
of
lot in a
representatives.
short period of time.
Do what?
There's a lot of counties in a very short period of time.
Yeah,
You're right.
yeah, yeah. It sets up the eligibility requirements for representatives, including a minimum age of 24, 2 years of state citizenship, and the last 6 months of residency in the county they seek to represent, except for absences on official public businesses at the state or national level. So you had to live in the county you were in for 6 months. But just think about it. If you were a state representative or you were in the U.S. Congress or something like that, you very well are going to be in Washington for 6 months or more.
Right.
So that would kind of, not to disqualify you for that. Uh, I find the age interesting, 24. That's pretty young, honestly, for now standards, but I guess maybe back then it wasn't as young because life expectancy probably wasn't as long either. So
Yeah. I think a lot of the founding fathers were in their 30s. So, that really puts it into perspective.
yeah, they really weren't that old.
Right. Seems younger now than it used to be honest. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, you're right. Article 1 talks about that. And of course, it contains lots of definitions, and they really have to define things, not just the age, like you mentioned, but how to enumerate people and the counting of free male inhabitants, composition rather, and the election of the Senate, and the manner in which senators are chosen. So this is all going to be a little different than the way we do it today. People will pick up on it, I'm sure. But within 2 years after the first General Assembly meeting, in every subsequent 4-year term, so they've got a 2-year caveat to kick it off and get it off the ground, an enumeration of free male inhabitants above the age of 21 shall be conducted. It means they got to count everybody. So, and it's interesting because if you look at the tax list from this time, that's who they're counting. They're listing people who are free males above the age of 21. And, that's as close as we really get to a census for some of those early records that have been lost. So really valuable. But it says the number of representatives determined is based on, how many people on the enumeration, and it's apportioned or split up among the counties with a minimum of 40 representatives and a maximum of 100. And that's something different from today, too, because at the federal and state level, we're used to having the same number of people in the House and Senate, but a little different in these early days. It fluctuated. With representatives, new counties really aren't granted separation until they meet the required population threshold. So you couldn't decide you didn't like the way politics were going in your county and just break off, and form a new section. So that you had to actually meet some requirements, which was kind of important. So senators, again, serving 4-year terms. It's kind of different. Initially, the Senate only consisted of 11 members. Imagine that, just 11 people. So for every 4 members added to the House of Representatives, you got 1 member added to the Senate. So this is a fairly small legislature. In Senate elections, each county must have at least 1 senator until the number of counties matches the number of senators. When a new county is formed, it's to be considered part of the county or counties from which it was created for Senate representation. So they know they're creating a lot of counties in a very short period of time, and they've got to determine how they're represented. Senators, like you said, are chosen by eligible voters on the first Tuesday in May every 4th year, and they cast their ballots to elect senators based on the number of representatives their counties are entitled to have. So fairly straightforward stuff, but a little different than the way we do it today.
So again, setting up this government, how things are working, and it does surprise me some things, but then I think, well, this was 200 some years ago. That obviously it's going to be a little bit different, and they're going to think of things differently. But again, it makes sense for the time and so forth. The 4-year terms Again, that's a bit different. Even on the national stage, you think of 2 and 4 or however it goes. Um, but again, you think about the time you put into it and so forth, that you could see that 4 years is you can kind of manage that a little more. And the again, there's the commuting of it. You know,
Right.
how many times they assemble. You're looking at that's going to take you a month possibly to get there, 2 weeks, maybe minimum, depending on where how far away you are from Frankfurt or Danville, even at this point. So they need a little bit more time to kind of get there and do things.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But moving on to sections 11 through 15 of the article, it kind of pertains to the qualifications and procedures for electing senators. So, electors must meet certain criteria to be eligible. They must have resided in the state for at least 3 years prior to their election and be at least 27 years old. So, senators got to be a little bit older, a little bit older.
Still seems
um,
really young though, doesn't it?
it does. I know. I mean, which I mean, what is the U.S. Constitution? Like representatives are, you can be
Is it
25.
30?
I think. I
20 to
think it's.
25?
I think it's younger than that. I mean, somebody might need to check us on it.
Oh, for
Uh,
representatives, you said?
for representatives and senators, I thought it was
Okay.
both pretty in the 20s, like now. Um, I'm sure they just never like said, "Oh, let's change it," But anyway, senator electors gather at a designated location on the third Tuesday in May every 4 years to choose senators. So that's a lot different. You have these Senate electors who are going to come together and choose the senators. They vote for individuals with wisdom and experience and virtue, aged above 27, and residents of the state for at least 2 years before the election. If multiple candidates receive an equal number of votes, subsequent rounds of balloting and even the drawing of lots may be used to decide.
Well,
Uh,
that's crazy.
yeah, I know. Oh, that is nuts. I don't see that going over well these days.
Yeah, we played rock, paper, scissors. He won,
Yeah. Yeah, talk about somebody wanting to duel each other afterwards. Oh gosh, but and again, these are Senate electors, so I mean, you don't even have to win the people's vote; you just have to win the electors' vote to become a senator. The Senate electors are responsible for evaluating the qualifications and elections of their fellow senators. That doesn't sound shady at all.
No.
In contested elections, the person with the most legal votes, hopefully they're all legal, as determined by the electors, is admitted to the Senate. Um, Prior to these proceedings with the Senate election, electors must swear an oath of fidelity to the state and an oath of impartiality. Did I say that right? Impartiality?
Mhm.
Basically being impartial, in their selection of the governor and senators, choosing those whom they believe to be the most qualified for those roles. So again, you're getting senator electors, and then we'll get to this. I won't even get into the governor part yet. We'll save that for in a minute. Um, if a senator refuses the position, dies, resigns, or becomes disqualified, or relocates out of the state, the Senate must promptly, at their next meeting, select a replacement through a ballot election in the same manner as Senate election electors chose senators. Yeah, so there's nothing weird about that.
Yeah.
There's no way that could get shady at all.
Kind of a closed club there, folks. But yeah, and then it continues, even because sections 16 through 20 address the functioning of General Assembly and the rules that govern it. So, even that's somewhat different because, of course, they convene annually on the first Monday in November, unless the legislator changes the date. So they have the ability to change it. But, usually you're seated in the late fall, and that's not very different from today. Of course, the governor can call an earlier meeting, basically a special session. But each house, the General Assembly selects its own speaker and officers, fairly standard. The Senate may also designate a speaker pro tempore if the speaker ends up taking on the role of governor. So if you need someone to fill in the gap, you've got someone ready. Each house, the legislator is responsible for assessing the qualifications of his members. Like you said, there's some level of this today. I guess to some degree, people can be expelled. I guess from Congress, they threat that from time to time. But to think that the people seated are making decisions about who belongs, it does sound very different. Um, Contested elections are resolved through committees established in accordance with the law. Something kind of out of place. Majority of each house constitutes a quorum for conducting business. So all you have to have is 50% plus one. And the legislator can pass laws to enforce attendance if it needs to. So if you're not showing up, they can lower the boom on you. Each house has the authority to establish its own rules for disciplining its members for disruptive behavior. Hopefully, there's not a lot of that going on in the legislature. But, those early days were different. And like we said, with the 2/3 majority, you could actually expel a member. But you couldn't expel them for the same reason more than once. So if you kick them out and they get reelected, you're stuck with them. So you can find doing something else.
Yeah.
But, both houses, of course, maintain a journal of their proceedings, which are published weekly. And of course, it leaves out any part that's confidential if there was anything like that. But and this is something that's still produced. The House and Senate journals exist at the state archives, and you can go see them. So, kind of interesting stuff. But the votes of the members on any question can be recorded in the journals at the request of any two members. So, again, pretty standard today. If it's a touchy issue and you really want to get your opponent on the ropes, you record how everyone votes down, so you can go back to your home county and blame it on someone else. So you see some familiar patterns.
Yeah. Which had that's public record too. Like anybody can go see that at any time. Like
That's right.
even as soon as the adjournment today is done, you could go get that and read it if you wanted. It just seems so just a tad bit shady to say, hey guys, let's get you to be a senator elector, and then you can elect me to be a senator.
That's right.
And then we can just work together, and then I'll be a senator elector, and I'll elect you to be a senator. I wonder too, because it's not stated, but can a senator elector be elected to the Senate? It doesn't say that. That would be even more shady.
Oh yeah, I can only
But
imagine. We decided none of these guys are qualified. I'll do it.
yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah, yeah. That always works out well.
right.
Let's form a committee to search for somebody. You know what? I'll be the head of the committee. We didn't find anybody. I'll just do it.
Good job. Yeah.
Oh gosh. So moving on through sections 21 through 25 of Article 1. This covers various aspects of legislative procedure, compensation, and eligibility. So, these senators, they got to get paid some way or something. The meetings of each house and committees of the whole shall be open to the public. Anybody can check this stuff out, unless the nature of the business requires confidentiality. I wonder how many times they might have thrown that out there as, hey guys, this is confidential. Close the doors.
Right.
Um,
That'd be an interesting topic to research.
yeah. Like how many were confidential? Did they still do that today?
Yeah, I've never heard of it. I guess they
I,
could. I'm not sure.
I guess they could, but they probably know that there would be massive backlash if they did. Well, you're confidential. Whoa, everybody would be. I don't know. Neither house can adjourn for more than 3 days without the consent of the other house. Making sure the other people are working. You ain't want to be working on your own. They must remain in the same place where both are currently meeting. I find that pretty interesting. They have to be in which logistical, it makes sense that you would want them there together because of just the legislative process, but that it's written in the Constitution, you guys got to be in the same place.
Yeah, it is pretty different.
Members of the General Assembly and the Senate electors are entitled to compensation from the public treasury, currently set at 6 shillings per day for their duties, attendance, travel, participation, and choosing senators. So not only are the senators getting paid, the electors are getting paid. Which, do you know right off the top of your head what the worth of a shilling would be?
I was just pondering that in my mind. Not for this age. I'll have to check that out. But it doesn't seem
Yeah,
like a lot even back then.
yeah. So it'd be interesting. Again, we get a lot of comments. People post in the comments. Let us know because
That's right.
Um, we could Google it, but we don't. We're going to keep rolling. So this compensation can be changed by law, pretty much setting that they can get a raise or take it down if they need to. But any such changes cannot take effect during the tenure of the legislatures making the alteration.
Smart.
A little bit of nobility there, saying, "Hey, if we do raise it, we won't. It won't go to us. It'll go to the next people." So.
Right.
Members are also immune from arrest except for serious offenses and cannot be questioned for any speech or debate in the House.
Interesting addendum there.
Yeah, just adding that in there. We're pretty much immune to anything except serious offense. So, if you think about that in today's time, that would basically mean like speeding tickets, not going to have to worry about them.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, surely tax fraud would be a serious offense. um, but man, I mean, that's pretty much free reign on a lot of stuff. I mean, you could steal possibly. I mean, I don't know how much they would consider. But if you walked out on your tab or something like that, that would be. I don't know. Maybe that would be a serious offense at that time. That would be very bad against your honor and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I know there were laws against making noise on the Sabbath and those sorts of things. I guess the local mischief kind of deal. Maybe you're immune from that, but interesting nonetheless.
You're allowed to make a little bit of noise on the Sabbath, but anything else? Yeah, interesting. But senators and representatives are restricted from being appointed to any civil office under the state that was created or had its emoluments increased. So, and again, I assume that's with salary and stuff during their time in office. Pretty much, if they made any kind of law that would affect what they were doing financially, it couldn't take place until afterwards, or in this case, within 1 year after their term. An exception is made for members of the first legislature under the Constitution, because obviously they had to make they had to make it up.
Right.
So they obviously can't have to start earning their paychecks. Additionally, ministers of religious societies, members of Congress, and individuals holding certain offices are ineligible to be members of the House. So if you're already a member of Congress, you cannot be a member of the House. If you're a member of a religious society, you cannot be a member of the House, which I think that's pretty surprising of a piece there to say. I mean, that rules out clergymen, even priests, and I kind of would think of some of them were some sort of priest. So maybe in a sense of like if you're a Baptist priest, that's not a religious society, maybe.
Yeah, maybe they mean like like if you're in a monastery or a convent, or if you're one of the Shakers, and you're kind of
Yeah,
living apart because in some ways you would be exempted from your own laws because they live so separately. So I guess I can
yeah,
see it is
yeah,
surprising.
yeah. When vacancies arise in the House of Representatives, the Speaker is responsible for issuing um, uh, writs of elections to fill those vacancies. Basically, hold an election to get somebody in there.
That's right.
But some interesting ones. The section 21 through 25 have so a bit more ringers in there than the rest of them.
As often as I've seen the Constitution, I either miss these parts or I skimmed over it looking for something else. So as we did this, it's been interesting for me to refresh my own memory. But yeah, and as you said, Article 1's really long, so there's more sections to go. There's 26 through 29, and this is kind of defining matters related to the processes and executive approval accountability, that kind of thing. So, for example, all bills that dealt with money or revenue were supposed to begin in the House of Representatives. And that kind of makes sense, right? That's taxation, basically. And we just fought a revolution over taxation of no representation. And so if you got a tax bill starting in the Senate where people were picked by electors, there's a lot of Kentuckians who are going to say, this sounds kind of familiar. So, like at the federal level, it's supposed to start in the House, although the Senate can propose amendments. Um, and, before assuming your role, whether you're a senator or House of Representatives or even some civil positions like sheriffs, you had to take the oath that or an affirmation if you were not allowed to take oaths for religious purposes. That you're not given or promised bribes or treats or to secure your place in office. So you can't be buying your way in, and anyone convicted of offering a bribe or canvassing for the office is disqualified from serving in the capacity. So that makes sense. I mean, nothing too surprising about that. But it goes on to talk about what happens when a bill passes out of the legislature. So, assuming a bill passes both houses, of course, it's presented to the governor. And if the governor approves, they sign it into law. Quick, easy, and simple. But if the governor does not approve, they can return it with objections to whatever House of Representatives or Senate initially created the bill. The House reconsiders it, and if 2/3 of the House agrees, it can be sent over to the other House for reconsideration. And if 2/3 of the other House approves it, then the bill becomes a law. So, again, very similar to overriding the governor in some cases. In these cases, votes are recorded, and the bill becomes law despite the governor's objections if it isn't returned in 10 days. So, fairly standard to what we would see today. And of course, any order or resolution or vote that requires both houses to approve it, or let me say that again. Any vote, resolution, or order requires both houses to approve it. You can't go rogue if you're in the Senate and ignore the House of Representatives. Both houses have to approve it. Of course, it has to go to the governor, and it only takes effect if the governor approves it. Or if it's, again, disapproved, you have to have 2/3 vote to override that veto. So pretty interesting.
That's pretty much standard for today's time as well. There's not really much. That's really. I don't think there's really much any change at all in that. And which we'll get into. We'll get into go over Article 2 here of the Constitution that kind of pretty much sets up the governor. Pretty much the powers of the governor and so forth. And again, you'll see how little the governor actually has power that he has in, or how little the power the governor has in Kentucky. And even today, there's not as much. And the big thing is, like you just said about the veto power. Like, yeah, the governor can veto it, but if there's a 2/3 majority, it doesn't matter if the governor vetoes it or not. But anyway, the Article 2. We'll go over Article 2 and we'll wrap this episode up and go over the rest in another episode, because there is I think 7 articles
Something like that.
total. No, 11, 12. Jeez. Yeah, 12 articles. So, whew.
Oh, those at the end are pretty short, though. So, yeah.
That's true. So we'll get into the governor and kind of go through that a little bit. Article 2 basically outlines the executive branch and kind of gives the powers and responsibilities of the governor. The governor is the supreme executive power in the Commonwealth. The governor is elected by the Senate electors, and in the same manner as senators, and their choice is reported to the secretary. So think about this. The senators are elected by the senator electors, and the governor is elected by the senator electors. That's a lot of power for a group of electors.
Very small group. Yeah.
Whoever they are, however they get in there, you basically have to win them over. And now, again, the first governor of Kentucky, Isaac Shelby, he was pretty much unanimous, and I'm pretty sure that was a positive around. The people wanted that and stuff as well. But this is one of the reasons the Constitution has changed 7 years later, because they're like, oh, this is not good. This is not boding well with people. The governor serves a 4-year term starting on the first day of June following the election, which again, these elections were held in May. So that's not as far of a time, Um, the governor must be at least 30 years old, a citizen and a resident of the state for at least 2 years before election, unless on public business. Again, kind of the same kind of situation. And you think being a resident of the state um, is kind of a pretty big deal for the first ones, because about the first 9 or maybe 7 governors were all born in Virginia, and some of them didn't get to Kentucky until later years. Not that that really matters or makes a difference, but just showing that they wanted people that were living in Kentucky, obviously. Members of Congress or individuals holding certain offices cannot be governor. Um, the governor's compensation remains constant during their term, so they're going to be paid. The governor is the commander in chief of the state's military forces, except when called into services by the United States, which that kind of is a little interesting, but you got to think of the time period. We have, at this time, there's not a lot of Native American attacks and so forth, but they are prepared basically for any kind of war that could come to just Kentucky, and that was very possible, especially after the past 20 years of what's happened in the state. It's very reasonable that they would want to have that military leader in that extent. The governor nominates and, with Senate approval, appoints officers as established by the Constitution of law. So county officers must have been residents for a year within the county or area that it is created from. The governor can fill vacancies during Senate recesses, with commissions expiring in the end of the next session. I think that's still today. I think governors fill vacancies.
Hmm.
And I don't know if that's that might not be state senates. I think in the U.S. Senate, if like a U.S. senator resigns or whatever, the governor fills the vacancy, or maybe appoints it, and then the Senate approves.
Now, I know a lot of civil positions that require like the legislature to approve it. If the legislature is in session, if it's a commission or something like that, the president can go ahead and appoint someone. So
Okay. Okay. The governor can remit fines and fortitudes.
yeah,
Yeah, all right. And grant reprieves and pardons, except for impeachment cases. For treason, reprieves can be granted until the next session of the General Assembly. Yeah, throwing the treason out there. You never know.
we're not going to hang you until we all agree on it. The reprieve until we all get back together.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the governor can request written information from executive departments officers about their duties. The governor informs the General Assembly about the state's condition and recommends measures. That's kind of like a state of the Commonwealth, I guess.
Yeah.
The governor ensures the faithful execution of laws. Um, but another thing, in cases of death or resignation or removal of the governor, the Speaker of the Senate acts as governor until a new governor qualifies. An attorney general is appointed during good behavior and represents the Commonwealth in legal matters. Throwing that one out there. Secretary maintains official records, attests to the governor's acts, and provides information to the legislature when required by law. So there you go. Now we got a governor, so we can all breathe easy. um, but yeah, not too much stands out too crazy about the governor's duties, except the Senate electors. Pretty much, they have all the power.
Yeah, and the appointment of the Attorney General, of course, today we elect that person. It's a separate elected office, but yeah, back then it was
Yeah.
appointed.
Yeah. So that's the first two articles of the 16 total. But like you'd said, the rest of them are pretty quick. They're not that much detail. I mean, they got a lot of information in them, obviously, but
Right.
just not as in depth. I mean, the article two has a total of uh, shoot, I didn't have it written down. One, two, three, about 15 or so little bits. Article 1 has 29 sections. So that's quite a bit. And that's the bulk. That honestly is the bulk of the Constitution. Because once you, like you said, once you get to those Article 3 through uh, however many, it's just not as much information, but a good start. So
Right.
a new Constitution is born. Anything else? Anything else before we wrap up?
It's good for every Kentuckian to know, but don't get too comfortable with it because, like you said, in 7 years, we're going to go around again.
There you go. Well, um, that is about all of that. But yeah. Anyway, anything else?
I think that's it.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.
Welcome to the Kentucky History Channel, where we strive to bring you all the Kentucky history content you want and you deserve. Kentucky is a part of all of us, and we plan on covering all the history we can, from Pike County to Fulton County, from Louisville to Harlan. Here on our YouTube channel, you can find many videos dedicated to different events, people, governors, and places in Kentucky. There's something for everybody. While you're here, if you like the channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification button so you get notified anytime new Kentucky history is available. And if you want to support the channel, we have a Patreon page as well, or patreon.com/kyhistorypod. You've probably heard about Daniel Boone, but what about the rest of the frontiersmen who came to Kentucky and settled? That's what we want to bring to the Kentucky History Channel. The stories of the untold, the stories of those forgotten. One thing to expect on our channel is great Kentucky content. Some stories that you've never heard of. The Night Riders, who began in western Kentucky. Bloody Monday, the riots in Louisville. The assassination of Governor Goebel, the only governor ever assassinated in the United States. Stories from all over Kentucky, stories that are unforgettable once you've heard them. You can find out who counties in Kentucky are named after and how your county got started. From beginning to end, we plan to document every county in Kentucky, all 120. Reach out to us on all of our social media platforms. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And also leave a comment on one of our YouTube videos. You can also check out our podcast episodes. You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and many more. We're always seeking to find more Kentucky history so we can bring it to you. The viewers, the listeners, we want all the stories and all the events from Kentucky's great history to be told and shared everywhere.